The silence that changed everything. The lights on the set were still warm. The cameras had stopped rolling, but the air was heavy, as if something important had just happened and no one knew how to explain it. Extras whispered. The crew shifted, nervously, and the director stared blankly at the playback monitor, as if it could tell him what went wrong. Keanu Reeves had walked off the set without a word. At first, no one noticed. It wasn't unusual for Keanu to take quiet breaks between scenes. He wasn't the type to complain. He didn't throw tantrums, didn't demand anything. He was respected for that. But this time felt different. There was no break call, no nod, no glance. He simply turned away in the middle of a scene and left. He didn't even change out of his costume. Ana de Armas stood frozen, her lines still echoing in her head. Her character had just said something cruel. Scripted, of course. But there had been something in Keanu's eyes when she delivered the line. Something she hadn't seen before. Not pain exactly. Something older than pain. Like a memory suddenly resurfaced, or a wound he thought had healed tearing open without warning. She looked at the spot he had stood, then at the path he had taken. No one else moved. The director cleared his throat. "Take 5, he said quietly, though he knew no one would. Ana didn't ask questions. She followed. Outside, the evening air was cool, a soft breeze brushing the heat from her face. The lot was mostly empty, quiet except for the far-off hum of a generator. She spotted him near the edge of the lot, sitting on the curb, his back to her. He didn't flinch when she approached, didn't speak, just sat there, elbows on his knees, head down like he was holding something heavy inside. Ana hesitated. This wasn't in the script. This was real. Raw. "Keanu," she said softly, standing a few steps behind him. He didn't answer. She stepped closer and sat beside him, leaving just enough space to let him breathe. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them stretched out, not uncomfortable, but filled with unspoken things. "Was it something I said?" she finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. He shook his head slowly. "No, it was something I remembered." She didn't push. Instead, she waited. He took a breath. "When I was younger," he said, "I had someone in my life. Someone who said things like that. Things meant to break you down. Things that echo in your head long after they're said." Anna's throat tightened. "I didn't mean... No," he said gently, turning his head slightly toward her. "You were acting. And you were good. Maybe too good." She studied his face, searching for something. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe understanding. What she saw instead was weariness. Not from her. From years of carrying quiet weight. "What happened to her?" she asked carefully. He looked away again, toward the far gate where the streetlights blinked like tired eyes. "She passed away a long time ago, but some things don't leave with the person. They stay with you. The way they made you feel. The things they made you believe about yourself." Ana stayed quiet. Not out of fear, out of respect. She understood that kind of silence. The kind that comes not from not having words, but from knowing that none of them are enough. Keanu ran a hand through his hair and let out a slow sigh. "I guess I just needed a moment. Didn't mean to scare everyone." "You didn't scare me," she said softly. "You reminded me that we're all human. Even the people we think are made of stone." He smiled faintly at that. The kind of smile that's too tired to stretch but too kind to stay hidden. Then, for a while, they sat in that quiet. No cameras, no crew, just two people, connected not by fame or lines in a script, but by something deeper, vulnerability. And as the last bit of sunlight disappeared behind the distant buildings, Ana realized something. This wasn't just about a scene. This was about a man who had given so much to others that he'd forgotten what it was like to be held in return. Not physically, emotionally. "Keanu," she said after a while, "you don't have to hold it all alone." He looked at her, really looked this time. And for a second, the weight in his eyes lifted, just a little. "Thank you," he said, not just for the words, for seeing him. And as they sat there, the world around them quiet and slow, neither noticed the small crowd gathering by the stage. Doors, crew members, makeup artists, a few actors, all watching from a distance, not wanting to intrude, but unable to look away. Because in that moment, they weren't watching a star. They were watching a man being seen for the first time in a long time, and that was the beginning. The weight behind the silence. The next morning, the set felt different. Everyone showed up on time. The cameras were ready. Makeup was perfect. But something had changed, not in the schedule, but in the air. As if last night had pulled a curtain back, and now they were all standing in front of something raw and honest, something they couldn't unsee. Keanu walked in quietly, as always. But when the crew spotted him, conversation stopped mid-sentence. He wasn't wearing sunglasses or hiding under a hood. He carried no shield. Just himself. Calm, respectful, but with a certain tiredness that made people avoid eye contact out of guilt they didn't understand. Anna watched him from a distance. She had stayed up most of the night thinking about the way he spoke on that curb, how much pain he had carried inside without anyone noticing, and how close she came to being just another person who added to it. As the director gave instructions, Keanu nodded politely, then walked to his mark. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. His presence said everything, not loud, but grounded. The scene was supposed to be tense, their characters in conflict. Anna stood across from him, her heart pounding, not because of the scene, but because of what she now knew. She remembered his words. "You don't have to hold it all alone." "Action," the director said. Anna looked into his eyes, and for a moment, she didn't see the script. She saw him. Her voice trembled just slightly as she delivered her lines. It was subtle, but it carried weight. Real weight. She was speaking as the character, but also as herself. Someone who now knew that even the strongest people can break silently. Keanu's response wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Powerful. Controlled but not distant. His voice was lower than usual, like a man holding back a storm just behind his ribs. And for the first time in the film, the scene didn't feel like acting. When the director finally called "cut," no one spoke. The silence was deeper than applause. It was respect. "Let's take a break," the director said, his voice softer than usual. Anna stepped away, feeling her chest tighten. She wasn't sure if it was the scene or something more. She walked toward the backlot again, hoping for air, hoping to breathe away the emotions rising inside her. But Keanu was already there. He leaned against a trailer, sipping water, eyes closed like he was letting sunlight touch old wounds. She stood beside him again, just like the night before. "That scene," she said. "It didn't feel like acting." He opened one eye and glanced sideways at her. "Maybe it wasn't." "You all right?" He nodded. "I've learned to be." She frowned. "That's not the same as being okay." He let out a breath. "No, it's not." A silence passed between them again. This one more familiar, like two people sharing an invisible thread. "You know," she said gently, "people admire you, not just for your work, for who you are." He didn't respond right away. He stared out at the sky, his voice low. Admiration is easy when people only see the surface, when they see the calm, not the chaos underneath. Anna turned to him, fully now. "But that calm, it comes from somewhere. You earn it. You build it. even when the world gives you every reason to fall apart. He looked at her, and for the first time that day, his smile reached his eyes. It wasn't wide. It wasn't forced, it was warm, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Thank you," he said simply. That afternoon, news of the scene reached the producers. They played back the footage twice, then called the director. They asked what changed, why the chemistry had suddenly shifted. The director just said, "Something real happened. We caught truth by accident, but not everyone saw the full picture." That evening, tabloids started swirling. Keanu stormed off set. Anna and Keanu clash over scene. None of it true. None of it even close. Anna saw one of the articles while scrolling her phone. Her stomach twisted. The headlines made it seem like he was difficult, like he had caused trouble. It made her blood boil. She grabbed her coat and walked out into the night. She didn't care that it was late. She needed to talk to him. She knocked on the door of his small apartment, the one he never mentioned to fans because it wasn't glamorous. It was quiet, humble, just like him. He opened the door, surprised but not annoyed. "Saw the stories?" he asked. She nodded. "You're not going to say anything?" "Why would I?" he said calmly. "I know the truth. The people who matter know too." "But it's not fair," she said, stepping inside. "They don't get to rewrite what happened." He shrugged slightly. "People will believe what they want. And if they want drama, they'll invent it. But that doesn't change who I am, or who you are." She looked at him with new eyes. Eyes filled with admiration, not for the actor, but for the human being who stood so tall in silence. "You taught me something yesterday," she said softly. "Not with words, just by being you." He tilted his head. "What's that?" "That strength isn't about being loud. It's about carrying pain with grace and kindness." Keanu nodded slowly, his eyes soft. "Then I guess we both learned something." She sat down across from him, and for the next hour, they didn't talk about fame, scripts, or gossip. They talked about life, grief, dreams, loneliness, and hope. And as the city lights flickered outside, Anna realized something important. She had followed him out of worry. But now, she was staying out of something deeper. Respect. Connection. Maybe even healing. And Keanu, for the first time in a long time, didn't feel the need to walk away. The story behind the silence, a few days passed. The set returned to rhythm, but something still lingered beneath the surface. People spoke softer around Keanu, not out of fear, out of quiet respect. Anna noticed how the crew watched him now, not just as a star, but as a man they didn't fully understand. Yet the mystery of that day, of why he had walked away so suddenly, kept echoing in Anna's mind. Not because she was curious, but because she cared. He had trusted her with a glimpse of something personal, and it stayed with her. It made her want to understand him better. They were both back on set that morning, rehearsing a scene by a narrow hallway. The lighting team worked in silence, setting the right tones. The director adjusted the camera angles. Keanu stood still, focused, distant. Anna watched him carefully. When the scene ended, they sat down for a short break. She leaned in quietly and asked, "Keanu, may I ask something personal?" He looked at her, thoughtful. "You can ask. You said someone used to speak to you the way my character did in that scene. Was it someone close?" Keanu didn't answer right away. His fingers tapped gently against his coffee cup. "My father," he finally said, his voice flat but heavy. He was a man who believed silence was weakness, and pain was weakness too. If I cried, he mocked me. If I stayed quiet, he called me useless. Anna's throat tightened. Keanu continued, looking ahead. "When I was 10, he left, just disappeared. No goodbye, No explanation. I remember sitting at the window every day for weeks, thinking he'd come back. But he never did. And the worst part? A part of me still wanted him to, even after everything. He paused and looked down. When you grow up like that, you learn not to trust warmth. You think kindness is a trick, like someone's just waiting to pull it away. Anna didn't interrupt. She let his words settle in the air. I thought acting would help, he said, with a faint smile. Playing someone else, being someone stronger. But no matter what role I played, I always carried the boy by the window inside me. She touched his arm gently, the way someone would touch a bruise, soft, careful, knowing it still hurt. You didn't become stronger by acting, she said. You became stronger by surviving. He looked at her with a small nod, almost like he was hearing that for the first time. You know, she added, it's strange how the world sees you, like some kind of perfect man, humble, calm, always kind. But now I realize, maybe that's not who you are because life was easy. Maybe that's who you are because it wasn't. Keanu smiled at her. Maybe. Or maybe I just didn't want to become like him. Anna leaned back in her chair, her heart heavy. It makes sense now. That scene. The way you broke when I said those words. It wasn't about the line. It was about the memory. He nodded. And you've carried that for all these years? Some things don't leave, he said quietly. They just sleep. Anna took a deep breath. Thank you for telling me. Keanu looked at her with calm eyes. Thank you for asking. Later that day, during filming, something subtle shifted. Anna's performance changed. She didn't just act, she felt. Every word she spoke had weight. Not because of the script, but because she now knew what it meant to hurt someone without realizing it. The crew felt it too. The tension between them in scenes now had depth. The director quietly said, "We've found the soul of the story." Between scenes, Anna and Keanu began talking more. Not just about the film, but about life. About what it meant to keep moving forward when the past kept pulling you back. She found herself opening up too. My mother was always sick, Anna shared, one evening as they walked around the quiet lot. I was a child trying to act like an adult, smiling so people wouldn't worry, pretending to be strong. Keanu looked at her gently. You still do that. She laughed quietly. I know. Didn't give advice. He just listened, the way only someone who truly understood could. That weekend, there was a cast dinner. Formal. Cameras, smiles, laughter. But when Keanu walked in, something strange happened. A reporter asked him, "How do you manage to stay so grounded while working in Hollywood?" Keanu smiled politely, but his answer was simple. You never forget where you come from, especially the pain. And just like that, the room grew quieter. The laughter paused. People heard something in his voice they hadn't expected. Truth, Anna watched him from across the table, and in that moment, she realized something powerful. He wasn't just surviving. The world. He was teaching it how to be better, and she wanted to be a part of that lesson. Her turn to break the following Monday. The sky over the studio was gray, and the clouds hung low like heavy curtains. The team prepared for one of the most emotional scenes in the film, a turning point between the two lead characters, filled with regret, vulnerability, and an apology that would either break or rebuild everything. But what no one knew was that Anna had barely slept. All night, she had replayed Keanu's words in her mind. The image of a young boy staring out a window, waiting for a man who never came back. The quiet sadness in his voice when he said, "Some things don't leave. They just sleep." His honesty had opened a door inside her, one she had kept shut for too long. And now, Memories she had buried beneath years of hard work and rehearsals began to surface like smoke through cracks. On set, she tried to hide it. Her makeup was perfect, her outfit crisp. But her eyes were tired, not from lack of sleep, from carrying something alone for too long, Keanu noticed. The moment she walked past him, he could feel it. Not with his eyes, but with something deeper. Empathy. He waited until the scene was done, waited until the lights dimmed and the director stepped away. Then he quietly followed her to the dressing trailer, where she sat alone, staring at the mirror, but not seeing herself. "You okay?" he asked gently, standing at the door. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." He stepped inside and closed the door softly. "You don't have to lie to me." Her lips trembled. She tried to keep the tears in, but the dam was already cracking. She looked at him and whispered, "You shared your story with me, and it made me feel like I wasn't alone. But it also reminded me of mine." Keanu said nothing. He just waited, calmly, patiently, like someone who had stood in that same emotional storm and knew how to hold space for others. Anna wiped her cheek quickly. "My mother. She fought cancer for years. When I was 16, she made me promise not to cry in front of her. She said she wanted to go peacefully and that seeing me sad would make it harder." Keanu's expression softened, his heart tightening with each word. "So I smiled," she continued, her voice cracking. "Every day I smiled for her, even when it hurt, even at her funeral. And then I just kept smiling for producers, directors, fans, everyone." A tear finally slipped free. "But inside, I stopped feeling things. I just performed, not just on camera, in life." Keanu moved closer, slowly, then sat across from her. "You know," he said gently, "the strongest people I've met, they're not the ones who smile the most. They're the ones who've had every reason to break, but still choose to love. The world anyway." Anna looked at him, tears in her eyes. "I'm tired of pretending." "Then don't pretend," he said. "Not here, not with me." For the first time in years, Anna let the tears fall freely. No camera, no audience. Just honesty, and for the first time she didn't feel ashamed of them. Keanu handed her a tissue, but more than that, he gave her silence. Not the empty kind, but the safe kind. The kind where you're allowed to feel everything. When she finally caught her breath, she asked softly, "How do you keep going? After all you've been through?" He looked down, thinking carefully. "I stopped trying to be okay, and started trying to be honest. And when I did, the world didn't get easier, but I got lighter." Anna nodded slowly, letting those words settle into her bones. Later that day, they stepped back on set for the emotional scene. This time, the cameras weren't just capturing performances, they were capturing truth. Anna stood in front of Keanu, her character shaking, uncertain. And when she delivered her line, her voice cracked, just slightly, beautifully. "I didn't know how much it hurt you, until I saw myself in your silence." Keanu's eyes glistened, not with acting, but with something real. And when he stepped forward, when he answered with just a whisper, "You don't need to fix it. You just need to stay." The entire room held its breath. The director didn't call cut. He just stood there, letting the moment breathe. The makeup artist cried. The assistant behind the boom mic looked away, wiping his eyes. Even the cameraman's hands shook slightly, not from pressure, from emotion. When the scene ended, there was a silence that no applause could replace. It was the kind of silence that followed truth, the kind that didn't need words. Afterward, Keanu and Anna sat together outside on the steps of the soundstage. Neither said much, until Anna looked at him and said, "Thank you for not walking away." Keanu smiled softly. "Thank you for staying." And as the evening fell over Hollywood, the two of them, no longer just co-stars, no longer just actors in a story, sat side by side, not because they had to, but because they chose, to two people with bruised hearts, sharing the kind of quiet that heals. When truth becomes light, the sun dipped lower behind the studio buildings, casting long, golden shadows across the empty lot. The evening had a quiet grace to it, as if the world itself was holding still, letting them breathe. Anna sat beside Keanu on the concrete steps, her elbows resting on her knees, her hands nervously fidgeting with the sleeves of her jacket. The tears were gone now, but something tender remained. Not pain, not shame, just truth, open and raw between them. "Why? No," she said quietly. "I used to think showing weakness meant I'd lose everything I worked for." Keanu glanced sideways at her. "And now? Now I wonder how many roles I played, without ever really being me." He nodded slowly, taking in her words. They sat in silence for a moment. It wasn't awkward. It was grounding. Both of them had peeled back layers in front of each other that few people ever got to see. Not behind cameras, not in interviews, not even in friendships that came and went with fame. Anna turned to him, her voice soft. "Do you ever wish you could go back and speak to your younger self?" Keanu smiled faintly. "Every day." "What would you say?" He paused, then answered with no hesitation. "I'd tell him it's okay to feel everything, and that one day he'll become the man he never believed he could be." Anna swallowed hard, blinking against the sting behind her eyes again. Keanu looked at her gently. "What would you tell your younger self?" She thought for a moment, then whispered, "That it's not her fault, and that she doesn't have to smile for everyone." He smiled, not just at her words, but at her courage to say them. Later that week, something unexpected happened. The director called a full cast meeting in the screening room. Curiosity spread fast. When everyone arrived, he dimmed the lights and played the raw footage from their latest scene, the one that had left the crew speechless. No music, no edits. Just real, unfiltered emotion. As the scene played, no one in the room moved. No one spoke. They watched as Anna trembled, her character unraveling with quiet sorrow. They watched as Keanu stepped forward, his eyes filled with unsaid stories. And when the final line was delivered, "You don't need to fix it, you just need to stay," the screen faded to black. The lights returned, and the room stayed silent for several long seconds. Then the director said something that no one expected. "I've directed over 40 films," he said, "but this is the first time I felt like I wasn't watching actors. I was watching people." Someone in the back clapped, then another. Soon the room filled with quiet, sincere applause. Not the kind you give for show, but the kind you give when something reaches deep inside you. Anna felt her throat tighten. Keanu didn't clap. He just sat quietly, taking it in. After the meeting, as the crowd cleared out, Anna stayed behind. She stood in front of the screen, staring at the empty black frame, thinking of how far she had come in just a few days. How one man's silence had cracked open her own. How their shared pain became shared healing. Keanu walked up behind her. "You were incredible in that scene," she said softly. "So were you," he replied. She looked up at him. Do you think this is what healing looks like? Not fixing everything, but just being honest with it?" He gave her a look that was part smile, part something deeper. "I think it's the first real step." They walked out. Together, the evening air cool around them. The soundstage behind them quieted for the night, but inside, something had shifted forever. The next day, Anna surprised Keanu with something small but meaningful. A leather-bound notebook with a ribbon tied around it. She handed it to him without a word, her eyes gentle. He opened it. The first page had a single line written in soft pencil, for the boy by the window. "You're not alone anymore." He looked at her, and something in his chest softened in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Thank you," he whispered. "It's not just a gift," she said. "It's a promise." He nodded, closing the notebook slowly, holding it like something sacred. That evening, on set, the director gave them the final scene of the day, a quiet one. No shouting, no tears. Just two people sitting in a room, learning to exist beside each other again. They barely rehearsed it. They didn't need to. When the cameras rolled, Keanu leaned back in the chair, his hands folded loosely, his eyes focused on her. Anna sat across from him, calm but fragile, the way someone looks after a storm has passed, still wet from the rain, but grateful it's over. The scene ended with one line from her. "Thank you for staying." And one from him. "I never wanted to leave. I just didn't know how to stay." The director called cut, but no one moved, because the line wasn't just for the script. It was the truth, and everyone in that room knew it. The quiet ending that changed everything. A week passed, then another. The film entered its final days of shooting. Each scene now felt richer, more honest, not because the script had changed, but because the hearts behind the words had. Anna and Keanu no longer rehearsed like actors. They listened to each other like human beings. Every pause between lines, every glance, every silence. It all came from something real. Something earned. Word about the transformation on set had begun to travel quietly through the studio lot. Even crew from other films started visiting to watch them work, not out of fandom, out of admiration. There was something magnetic about what was happening, something rare. One afternoon, after wrapping up a heavy emotional scene, the director called Anna and Keanu aside. He looked at them, long and hard, then said, "I've been in this industry for 30 years, and this is the first time I've witnessed a story come alive, not because of the script, but because the two people inside it allowed themselves to be vulnerable. You didn't just act, you gave us yourselves, and I'll never forget that." They didn't say much. They didn't need to. A small nod from Keanu, a warm smile from Anna. That was enough. That night, there was a small wrap party. Nothing flashy, just a quiet gathering with lights strung across a courtyard and a few tables with food and drinks. Music played softly in the background. Laughter filled the air, but Anna sat away from the crowd, her thoughts somewhere else. Keanu noticed and walked over with 2 cups of tea. He handed her one, then sat beside her under the soft glow of the garden lights. "You thinking about what comes next?" he asked. She nodded. "Always." He sipped his tea. "Me too." She looked at him carefully. "Do you ever get scared that after a project ends, the connection you built with someone just fades away?" He looked at the steam, rising from his cup, and said gently, "Yeah, but sometimes the connection isn't tied to the project. Sometimes it's tied to the people, and those don't fade." Anna smiled, her eyes soft. "I hope this one doesn't." Keanu looked at her with that same quiet strength. "It won't. Not if we choose not to let it." The party continued. Behind them, but in their little corner of stillness, something beautiful was happening. Not dramatic, not loud, just real. Two people who had started this journey as co-stars were now something more. Not lovers, not headlines, but soul-level friends, the kind that only come around once or twice in a lifetime. A month later, the first trailer of the film dropped online. Within minutes, it was trending globally. Not because of explosions or famous cameos, but because of one single scene, the one where Anna's character breaks down saying, "I didn't know how much it hurt you, until I saw myself in your silence," followed by Keanu whispering, "You don't need to fix it, you just need to stay." That clip alone was shared millions of times. People wrote in the comments about how it made them cry, how it reminded them of their father or their partner or their past, how it felt like someone finally spoke the words they were too afraid to say. Anna watched those comments from her apartment, tears sliding down her cheeks. Then she texted Keanu, "You were right. People don't need perfect stories. They need honest ones," he replied a few minutes later, "and they need people brave enough to tell them, like you." A few weeks later, at a private interview, a journalist asked Anna, "What's the most important thing you took away from this film?" She thought for a moment, then smiled softly. "That healing doesn't always look like being strong. Sometimes it looks like falling apart, with someone who stays." The journalist smiled. "Was that someone in your life, Keanu?" Anna looked down, then up. "Yes," she said simply. "And he changed my life." The film premiered to standing ovations and critical praise. But beyond the awards and reviews, something more powerful happened. People began writing letters, long, emotional messages about grief, about silence, about what it means to be seen by another human being. One letter, from a young man in Argentina. "Read, I was going to give up on life until I watched that scene. Now I'm still here. Thank you." Keanu read it, and sat in silence for a long time, not because he didn't know how to respond, but because he understood, deeply, what it meant to feel like giving up, and what it meant to feel seen instead. Months passed. Life returned to its usual pace. Anna flew to Europe for her next role. Keanu returned to his bike shop and quiet mornings. They didn't speak every day, but once a week, without fail, a message would arrive, sometimes just a single line, "How's your heart today?" Or, "I'm remembering the boy by the window," or "Still staying." And sometimes silence, but the good kind. The kind where nothing needs to be said, because everything that mattered had already been shared. One quiet Sunday evening, Keanu took out the leather-bound notebook Anna had given him. He opened it to a blank page, and for the first time in years, he began to write. Not as a character, not as a performance, but as himself. A man no longer hiding behind silence. A man finally letting his story be light.